early days of the Cold War, the CIA ordered the creation of a secret program intended to find ways of mind control.
And this paper detailed how the CIA's mind control program, MKUltra, was not stopped in 1973, as the CIA had told Congress.
Full of bad bitches, yes, I'm a bag of them. Cup full of pink, looking like it's a dynamo. Drive by his house and I leave it with damage wall. Banging on 979.
Instead, the paper reported it had merely been transferred out of public hospitals and prisons into the more secure confines of religious cults, that he believes that Jonestown was one of those religious cults, right? And I just thought that fits really well with what I mean, because really consider like all the different cults sprouting up during this time. The satanic panic that was about to.
With a pretty bitch in a fat dyke. I'm covered in ice like it's negative 30 degrees. No way, Jose, they ain't heard it from me. Bitch, I got me a gallon of Texas tea. Fuck playing A and B, I'ma throw them in the sea.
A lot of people don't realize if you dig a few inches deep down the surface of like the OKC McVeigh type lore, there's that too.
Ice like it's negative 30 degrees. No way, Jose, they ain't heard it from me. Bitch, I got me a.
Hey guys, it's Jose Galison. You're watching No Way Jose. You can find me on the No Way Jose YouTube channel, all the major auto podcatchers, and Rumble as well. Today, my guest, Austin Picard. We're continuing our Finders Cult series. Doing this one as a live stream because my guest last week, we had to reschedule, not throwing any shade. They had some circumstances come up, and that's fine, but I didn't have anything to get out to the general public. But I do have for my patrons, just because of the fact I was doing like only one a week during the holidays, but I'm back to trying to do 2 a week if I can. And so for my patrons to make up for this being a live stream and you guys not getting the inside scoop, I have Pete Quinones coming on tomorrow, Thursday the 11th, to talk about the pogroms. So, which I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. I don't know a ton about them, so I kind of want to find more. And that's, I guess, an area Pete has looked into a bunch. So we're going to have him on and talk to him. But if you want to be able to get that early, because otherwise, if you're not a patron, you're going to have to wait a whole week for that. And whatever, if not, if that's what you got to do, that's fine. But if you want to help support what I'm doing and get that content early, it's patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Lowest level is $2 just to get the early episodes, or you can go up higher, the highest being the sponsors. My sponsors, I read them off every episode. I have Toad, who's my co-host on Tower Gang, at Tower Gang Toad. I also have at Abrogate D's, then Kevin B. Clark, a full-time guitarist and private music teacher in the New York area, then at ZOVERACK, then at _Infinite Zeal. Then I have Jacob Daniel, the Biblical Anarchy podcast. I was just on his, actually it was like a month ago, but he just now released it. So I just had I think it was today actually it came out. So go check that out. Follow him at Biblical Anarchy. Then I also have Tim Tuttle. I see him in the chat right now. He's usually one that supplies me with those edits. The edit today, though, that was from my buddy Laney. That shit was dope. But yeah, you can follow Tim Tuttle at Jolly on Klebold. Then I also have at Stinky Sock 420. He's a singer of the Bender hardcore band. Go check him out. And let's get into this. I am excited. I do want to let you guys know this is a live stream. I'll take questions. I give out to my patrons for the $5 level. I give them usually like a code, but I gave it out for all of you guys this time around. So if you guys put a little code in there, I'll know which one it is in the chat, and I'll give you guys preference. But aside from that, I will kind of somewhat be monitoring the chats best I can. And I also do want to let you guys know I'll put this out tomorrow on like Rumble and the podcatchers and stuff. But all right, without any further ado, let's get Austin here. Let's get into it. What's up, dude? What about
buddy?
These Jew tunnels?
Oh my God. Honestly, dude, the first thought in my mind as soon as that story broke was McMartin preschool tunnels, dude. Like 100%, and it's crazy because it links perfectly later on, like here in a little bit when we get deeper into, the finale of the Finders. I'll mention Toby Terrell, which is he basically came out as the spokesperson for the Finders as soon as the arrest happened in '87 in Tallahassee, and he also wrote a book about Marion Petty and the Finders called The Game Caller, right? And he mentioned in that book that he had been given a game by Marion Petty basically directly after the Tallahassee incident. And that game was to go to Manhattan Beach and to check what he called the atmosphere around the McMartin preschool incident. And I just thought that alone, right? Like, beyond the fact that tunnels seem to come up in almost every one of these similar stories, I mean, even Pizzagate had a story on tunnels under that block, connecting all those connected businesses involved with Medium Matters, David Brock and James Alefantis. So it's just like, oh my God, talk about pattern recognition, right? Like, how many times can we see the same things, before it's no longer a coincidence?
Because it is like when people are arguing about like the Jew tunnels, like it is like to some extent, I'm just like, it's got all the elements.
I know, right?
Like, I know, I get it. It's like all we really have is like one little like high chair, one like poop / blood stained mattress.
Fuck,
but
I
it's
saw
like
somebody.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't know how credible it is. These tunnels supposedly led to like near the area of a children's hospital. And so it's like, or no, children's museum or something along those lines. So it's like, I mean, if you were to have a trafficking operation in a city, in an urban environment, what better system would there be than to go through like abandoned maintenance tunnels and into the back of some seedy synagogue's tunnel somewhere? Like,
exactly.
Just scurry them right under. No one's gonna like who's checking that. Like my buddy TopLobsta, he used to work in the railways, and like he can attest to, like, it's just like sprawling infrastructure of like maintenance, tunnels and all sorts of stuff just under New York. So it's like, I mean, I don't know. But and it's not even specifically just a Jew thing particularly, because it's like, we're talking about satanic stuff, but it's like, it's just a common pattern, that like not the Jew thing particularly. I mean, whatever, you can find those patterns too, but the tunnels and just like, I don't know, it just doesn't look good. Yeah, and the official narratives that we're getting on it, I just don't find compelling or like don't find plausible, which it's like, I guess to a normie, you're like, oh really, you find it more plausible there's the child diddling ring going on? You're like, I mean, kinda.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. But I mean,
I don't know. Yeah. By the way, go make sure to check out my shit on Rumble, because I don't know how long this won't stay up.
Oh my God, bro.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was my immediate reaction though, was no doubt the McMartin tunnels, But anyway.
Yeah, you wanna I wanted to talk about this anyways, but then there was a Patreon question asking if we had talked about the McMartin thing before, and I don't think we had brought it up. Maybe we brought it up in passing, but if you could just give a quick rundown to my audience what that was, because I know you have a better grip on it than I do. I've dug into it a little bit. I just finished the audiobook for Program to Kill, and I'd heard of it like brought up in other times before. So like I'm like, have a cursory understanding of it. And I know that my understanding is recently, and I believe it was actually in the Pursuit of the Finders cult stuff, more information came out that redeemed that original, say, like what, the defend or the kids were saying essentially, whereas before it was written off Satanic Panic, and there was a lot of stuff we didn't see, and it was almost like this like established fact that like, oh, that's old conspiracy stuff that was proven wrong kind of deal. And then more stuff came out, I believe, with the Finders files. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so it's like that like directly connects into this. So I just find that interesting. Obviously, it's really messed up to think about the concept of what's that means, and the fact that we're seeing similar archetypes play out in different points in time of the same thing. It makes you wonder what incentives are in place here.
No doubt. And well, that direct connection came from the vault documents, the FBI vault documents in 2019, when basically over the course of a few weeks, they released like over 600 documents, and it was mostly all pertaining to the finders. But right in the middle of the document dump, what just so happened to be a map of the tunnels under the McMartin preschool with an attached document that detailed what was found in those tunnels, right? And so most people at the time were basically asking the question, well, why on earth were there two documents that when McMartin didn't come up anywhere else in the document dumps, and what does it seem? What is the implication there? Where's the connection to the finders, right? And like I mentioned, like basically the only real connection I could come up with. And again, I haven't personally, like, I'm excited now because I'm going to do a deep dive myself on the pod about McMartin, and I think sooner rather than later because the timing seems right. But but it like I mentioned just a moment ago, like that Toby Terrell connection of getting that, and that's what Marion Petty called the games. Like he's called the game caller. They had all the in the warehouse, all of their projects were listed as operations, and the fact that the whole premise was he would give these members of the finders games to go play, right? Which, call it whatever you want. Going to Manhattan Beach to check on the atmosphere around McMartin while your group's being investigated for a potential child sex trafficking operation, and it could even without a doubt included a child pornography operation, then is it really just a loose connection at this point? You can't be certain of much, but anyway, so to briefly at least mention, like, I think the best way to introduce McMartin just briefly is to use the text of the letter that the police department sent to over 200 parents of the students at McMartin. And I mean, just like imagine getting this letter as a parent, right? Your children are going to this, I mean, what was it, McMartin Elementary School, or was it actually a preschool?
It was a preschool, I believe.
That's what I thought. It was a preschool, yeah. And so this is September 8th, 1983, okay? And it says, "Dear parent, this department is conducting a criminal investigation involving child molestation. Ray Bucky, an employee of Virginia McMartin's preschool, was arrested September 7th, 1983 by this department. The following procedure is obviously an unpleasant one, but to protect the rights of your children as well as the rights of the accused, this inquiry is necessary for a complete investigation. Records indicate that your child has been or is currently a student at the preschool. We are asking your assistance in this continuing investigation. Please question your child to see if he or she has been a witness to any crime or if he or she has been a victim. Our investigation indicates that possible criminal acts include oral sex, fondling of genitals, buttock or chest area, and sodomy, possibly committed under the pretense of taking the child's temperature. Also, photos may have been taken of children without their clothing. Any information from your child regarding having ever observed Ray Bucky to leave a classroom alone with a child during a nap period, any nap period, or if they have ever observed Ray Bucky tie up a child is important. Please complete the enclosed information form and return it to this department in the enclosed stamped return envelope as soon as possible. We will contact you if circumstances dictate. We ask you to please keep this investigation strictly confidential because of the nature of the charges and the highly emotional effect it could have on our community. Please do not discuss this investigation with anyone outside your immediate family. Do not contact or discuss the investigation with Raymond Bucky, any member of the accused defendant's family, or employees connected with the McMartin preschool." But, I mean, imagine getting that letter from the police, like.
And then probably assuming that this will probably work out well and they have my best interests in mind.
Right.
Which,
yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe they did. I don't know who contacted them and how this worked out,
Right.
so far as logistically. But obviously, I know how it ended. And the
Right.
idea is I think they mostly tried to spin it as their the stuff they were telling their psychologist was manipulated out of them. It was part of it. It was partially also this like false memory syndrome, and sometimes those two play into each other. And so they basically tried to discredit all of the testimony, which I guess for a bunch of preschool children, I mean, I guess that leaves a lot of room for a lawyer to be able to argue one way or another that, kids are easily impressionable, and, they could have watched a movie or something, and then they shared this among friends, and now you have this idea that's taken form among them. And that's what it seems like kind of happened from my understanding of the case. And it kind of got written off and swept under the rug as the satanic panic stuff, which we kind of, even in the intro, I think we alluded to it, that I think there may have been more to that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there was some stuff that was likely, probably even maybe in some cases intentionally elevated to as the silly cases were like, oh, look at this. Oh, they think some witchcraft's going on, but clearly it's not. Everyone's just all up in a panic,
Exactly.
and so those cases get elevated. And then the one where real dark stuff's going on, it just gets kind of like sucked into that, ether of the not as credible ones.
Right.
But I think there was something going on. And so obviously McMartin is a prime example to prop this up. But I mean, once you kind of understand what what this implies here and what's going on, and then you think of things like Epstein, you think of things like the Finders Cult. I mean, even as silly as it is, and because this isn't as confirmed, we have very little. I mean, at the very least, you can see the hallmarks in the Jew tunnels thing.
Oh,
so, so.
Stop it, Jose.
What else can I call them? I'm not even. Not every Jew was in those Jew tunnels. Okay?
Oh my God, dude!
All right, I'm not. This is an inundation of all Jews. I mean, just that specific group of Hasidic people. Not even saying the entire temple. I don't know who was on the take or on the no, and I don't even necessarily know what was going on there. I'm just saying when you kind of start seeing these things and piecing together, you're like, oh, okay. Because we're going to point out. I mean, maybe I'm recollecting this wrong, but there is another major connection between Epstein and the main spook character we have in this story, old Marion, which is a dude. Which the only Marions I've ever known in my life were chicks. So it took me a while to figure that out. When the first couple times I kind of went, rolled myself through the story. But yeah, I mean, I guess maybe that might be. Well, I guess let's just kind of talk about the Epstein drops and your thoughts about that, because I did find there was some crazy irony in that Dershowitz got heavily implicated in a lot of this stuff.
Oh, wow.
And the timing of it was right when he was about to go to the UN to argue that Israel wasn't committing genocide. I guess they stopped that last minute, but it was serious? Yeah, because I mean, I think they really were like, yeah, I don't know if I want this guy defending us, but it was like, man, the irony, it would have been just glorious. Like, yep, this is a guy saying we're not committing genocide.
I haven't, and I haven't looked, into much into.
I'm sorry, it's not right to giggle, but it's like, hey, we have this intelligence arm that's well known for manipulating powerful people with very dark means, and here's this guy that's heavily implicated in this, and he's going to argue that we're not committing genocide or ethnic cleansing or whatever you want to call it.
And if we weren't laughing, I would basically be crying. So it's like my only way to deal with this. But before. By the way, I haven't looked into what Richard Booth said about RFK Jr.'s perverted sex diary, but that just like, my God,
he's bending over backwards for Israel. It's insane.
It fits so well. It makes so much sense. And the idea that he had this perverted sex diary, that basically he's technically a victim of blackmail, as far as the notion is that he's basically being blackmailed as a part of the Epstein blackmail operation, and that he apparently had this perverted sex diary that his ex-wife had discovered, and after reading it, appeared to be distraught she committed suicide by hanging.
Yeah,
right?
I forgot the specific diary part, but I do remember the rest of that people imply she found out something, and that's kind of the conspiracy. I never dug in too deep into it. But
I haven't yet either,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, people go check out Richard's account. I don't know what
Hey,
exactly he
Richard hasn't
said,
lied to
but
me yet.
yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, he will usually, if it's something that's more conjecture, you can usually
Right.
tell whether it's
He'll
his
be
tone
honest with
or he
that.
specifically says it,
No doubt.
the degree to which you should
Yeah,
take
he wasn't
credence in it.
confirming anything, but yeah, that claim alone was just wow, you know,
Yeah.
and it did fit perfect because of everything I had seen RFK Jr. pivot so heavily, you know, on but to be like, I mean, so accurate on his diagnosis of the Ukraine conflict, and then to see him pivot and basically overwhelmingly support, you know, the state of Israel in this
He
war
said the
against.
Palestinians were like the most pampered people on the world stage or something like
That's the
that.
craziest
Like,
thing I've ever heard, man.
what? Like
Yeah.
you could disagree that like with the whole, the underlying, property disagreement or whatever,
Exactly.
or even maybe convolute it and make it a religious thing, but like come on, like that's a
Yeah,
bit far.
exactly, man. Oh, and but by the way, to finish one last statement on McMartin was we had mentioned McMartin, I think in part 1, and I had
Okay.
mentioned Key McFarland, who she was like she had been the one who interviewed all those children, like over 400 of the kids at McMartin. And so I guess Kathleen McFarland was the director of the Children's Institute for International and the social worker who, like I said, was responsible for interviewing 400 children for the McMartin preschool trial. And that's when, by the way, I brought up that Dr. Naaman H. Greenberg, who seemed to first come into the Finders case, and he was the one who overruled the initial medical examiners who had found, signs of potential sexual abuse in the children at the Tallahassee incident, right? And he was the guy who Dr. Naaman H. Greenberg was the Chicago psychiatrist, was hired by the Florida Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services to examine the children, and stated that there were no signs of recent sexual or physical abuse, which casted doubt on the initial claims made by police. And he was also like affiliated with the Jewish Community Center case in Chicago as well. And yeah, that guy has a lot of connections to like what seems to be, intelligence at the highest level at this time, and was also a part of a children's organization as well while he was going around to all these different high profile trials and providing his expertise. But apparently, at first, he generally behaved as though he agreed with Key McFarland's findings, but then later in public, he pronounced that McFarland coerced the accusations of abuse from the children and goaded them into making slanderous allegations. But Key McFarland, she's the lady who later testified to Congress that she believed there was an organized nationwide conspiracy of individuals and orthodox satanic groups sexually abusing children. And it's just like, I'm Key McFarland. I for sure trusted her more than Naaman H. Greenberg whenever I did the research on the individuals and I listened to their statements. I mean, it was just clear to me who was, she wasn't speaking over emotionally as if she, her vision was clouded, as if she, was too emotionally attached to this case or anything of that nature. And the fact that he had initially supported all of her claims, and I mean, it's just, to me, it fit perfectly with how he had behaved previously with the other cases that he participated in. So I just thought it was at least worth mentioning because that was the connection that I had basically made between McMartin and the Finders, because not only did Toby Terrell get that game or whatever it was called by Marion Petty to go check the atmosphere at McMartin, but you also have, the same guy who goes in and overrules the credibility of the sexual abuse in the Finders case. He's popping up in all of these satanic panic child sexual abuse cases at the time. So, and you know, he never seems to find any actual evidence, while everyone else involved seems to find like copious amounts, right? Including, you know, we're talking investigators on the case, right? In Tallahassee. You know, I mean, it's just,
I mean,
as
to
an
bring it
outsider,
today, we saw the videos of tapes and all sorts of things being taken away from the Epstein, like some of the Epstein
oh
stuff.
my God.
I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm kind of like vaguely recalling this stuff, but I do remember seeing videos and articles being written of, you know, the fact that the FBI took tapes and other, you know, stuff like that from the whatever, some of Epstein's properties, whether that was at the island or some of his other properties. And have we ever heard of any of those? No.
Right.
So, and what tends to happen with the federal government when tapes of any sort of precarious situation end up in exclusively in their hands, you know? So
exactly.
It seems to be in most of these major things, the only time we ever really get tapes is when some intelligent person who happened to have the tape first makes a copy and then gives it to them, you know, or something along those lines. Plays a little deceptive. Those seem to be the only times we really get stuff like this. So, like the what is it, the Godiva's thing with McVeigh and Strassmeyer and Brescia, where they were at the strip club. The video. The only that the FBI got a copy of that from the strip club owner, and that one disappeared. But the strip club owner, I guess, you know, being a seedy character and kind of not being as naive as your normal, you know, upstanding business owner in the 90s, he probably was like, yeah, I'm making a copy.
Yeah, exactly, man.
So, and he did, and researchers got a hold of that.
Him.
So yeah. So
just so you know, don't ever give the only copy to the feds, please. You know,
yes, don't. But I mean, also give them a copy, because otherwise, if you don't, you very likely can end up
you're probably gonna die.
So pull a little tricky. I'm on your side. Here you go, pal.
Exactly.
Ooh, thank you for your service.
I never went like really deep on the story that one of the, and I think it was either a NYPD evidence locker or an actual FBI evidence locker that they had, the NYPD had housed a lot of the evidence that they had apparently taken from first the Anthony Weiner arrest, and then also when they raided the penthouse, Epstein's penthouse, Epstein's house that was rigged with audiovisual blackmail and was given to him for like $1 by Leslie Wexner. And yeah, like they had that fire where all that evidence just vanished, you know, and a lot of people were the implication was that that was the primary a warehouse for the Epstein evidence, right? And so who knows? You know, I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but
isn't the way we found COINTEL files was a bunch of, like, I think it was anti-war activists or something, literally raided an office and got the files.
Exactly. So like I said, I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like that's my overall point. But anyway.
So, all right, I'm gonna go through some of these chats, and then after that we'll touch on the connection between Epstein and the Finders. I think you know what you're talking about specifically in regards to Marion. Maybe I'm forgetting something wrong. Tim Tuttle brought up the McGowan Unnels. Yeah, I mean that's I actually think like a lot of this does click, which I'd already been kind of, you know, having some of these ideas before listening to Program to Kill. I have the actual book here, just haven't had a chance to get around to reading that. But that does kind of like bring up some stuff and starts to make you question some things with some of the examples they bring up. I'm not saying I completely buy everything. But he never actually explicitly says like. But he's kind of
love Dave McGowan though, dude. And when
he's kind of making the point that maybe serial killers or some satanic ties. And there are these groups out there, and to some extent they're the hitman for these groups. And then also on the flip side, sometimes the feds will just kind of just straight up murder people and use that just as a cover of, oh, we have a serial killer rampant over here,
right?
And they'll just add that on to his rap sheet.
And we know that the CIA, they use mafia hitmen all the time. They would contract out executions, all the time. And it, like, I just covered how they did this in like a 1981 triple homicide with Fred Alvarez at the Cabazon Indian Reservation, which is all tied to Danny Castellero's Octopus and the enhanced Inslaw Promise software scandal, dude. And Jonathan Pollock and like stealing the nuclear secrets, which led to Israel acquiring the nuclear weapons program that Mordecai Vanunu blew the whistle on, and then Robert Maxwell and Ghislaine's honeypot operation was used to entrap him and put him into prison in Israel, bring him back. The whole thing's nuts. But McGowan talked about when I found him doing the Boston bombings and all of that, like, dude, the blood squibs, all that, like, he's just such a great resource as far as like his weird scenes inside the canyon. Laurel Canyon is just one of my favorite subjects to talk about, because it really does implicate the entire scene of the counterculture. But go ahead.
I got like halfway through that one. But it does heavily tie into like the chaos stuff. It's kind of that similar scene going on. It just kind of shows you how thoroughly infiltrated these
and then look at the finders,
different sects of society are. Like even the celebrity cast, and then also where that interplays into like the hippies and all. Like they're just finding different spheres and like let's infiltrate it.
Lookout Mountain Laboratory. The guy that bought that property, he claims that after it was used as like a huge CIA base of operations, basically with the Rand Corporation and all of this, like PNAC, guys that formed the Project for a New American Century and all of that, they were meeting in Laurel Canyon to like hatch these ideas. And the guy that purchased the property, he said that that's where they filmed the moon landing. He said he found, I mean, who knows?
Maybe. I'm not saying. I actually would not be surprised.
I could see that.
I've never gotten like, I look at like the moon landing stuff the same way I look at flat Earth, and this might piss off some people. I'm just kind of like, I don't know. Maybe we land on the moon. Maybe the Earth is flat. Maybe it's round. I don't know. Like I'm like, I would, if I had to guess, I think it's probably round, but I don't know. I'm not really going to take the time to really go through all the flat Earth. Like, oh, this is how we do it. Like, I don't care. And like, if it's flat,
I'm with you on that.
I mean, if it's flat, like, I think whoever knows this should come out and be like, hey, guys, it's flat. But like, I don't think me going, guys, it's fucking flat is going to do that.
For sure. And I'm with you.
Whatever. If that's your thing, go for it.
Right. No, but I'm with you on all of that. But over time, I will be honest, I have no dog in this fight. All right. Yeah. But the founders of NASA alone, what the hell is going on there? And so for me, I always kind of thought like maybe NASA is a massive money laundering operation to, provide trillions of dollars from the taxpayer. I don't know.
Maybe Hawking really is just a puppet they rolled out to us.
How do we know he's the one that's operating that machine? That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't know. We covered this on Tower Gang. There was a video that I guess recently kind of made the rounds. I think Owen Benjamin shared around. It's kind of like, you guys think this dude was legit? Like, apparently before he had his little computer thing, he had a translator. And like, but you can watch the old videos, and it's, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. This is me being very gracious, but like, this dude is literally being incomprehensible grumbles and weird noises, and then the guy is like, yes, he says, well, I had a fine tenure in the sciences, and I enjoyed studying these, like, and just like very eloquent, and you're like, no, he did not say that. Like, there's no way that you have the gift of gab, and you're like, I can interpret this incoherent mumbling, which isn't even like resembling a word. But
it's not that hard to imagine that they could create a person like that.
It's not like they've never done it. So
exactly, yeah. And so, like with the moon landing, though, and the guy that got punched by Buzz Aldrin, that I forget his name, but he did like either he wrote a book or he did a documentary. Some funny thing happened on the way to the moon, and I don't know. He's not like he's not a source that I go to or anything, but at the same time, it is very, very unusual. And just the, the notion alone that the president's using a a rotary
Yeah.
phone to
Hey,
dial
guys.
up the moon, dude. I mean, that's a little absurd, but
At the
yeah,
very least, there was some trims and whistles, or whatever the hell the term is, put on that was just for show, just to make us
For
be like,
sure.
oh, there's our boys. But like,
Exactly.
all right. Someone also said, I bet the Finders had some sweet New York tunnels. Do you recall? I want to say there were something like that in the Finders, but maybe I'm recalling incorrectly. I mean, to be fair, they did have them in shit conditions. So like, I don't know. I think
Oh,
tunnels,
tunnels?
dank basements, whatever. Like, it's
It
kind of
was
similar
basements.
thing.
Yeah, definitely basements. But yeah, that was 100% mentioned, and it did come up because one of the kids, and I talk about it actually at toward the end of I can't remember if I included it in my podcast. I think I did, but because Elizabeth Voss does some real good work about implicating this Green Beret that was a member of the network, and he's basically implicated by one of the children, the only one who could really verbalize much, and he had been like, apparently he was very violent with the children, and he was basically implicated at another finder's property at a basement, behaving like, pretty aggressively, and from everything that I read. But yeah, so it does come up, but no tunnels from any of my research. Yeah.
All right, someone made fun of my hair. Just in the chat. I do want to say I didn't do this purposely. I got like the dude fucked my. I did completely not what I asked for, and I made a mistake as I almost always fall asleep during haircuts, like almost immediately.
That's so funny.
I don't know, it just feels good. The razor on my head, and just like I just passed right out. And I woke up kind of like with the craziest undercut I've ever seen in my life. And you guys know I had a slick back just not too long ago. If you watch the video, and my slick back like goes from here to like almost the back of my head, like so I would pull it and it goes past my chin. So like he literally just shaved off the sides, and then I had that. Like I literally had to come home and try to fix it with scissors. I thought about just going back to old school Jose and just completely shave it, but I figured, screw it, I'll try to fix it up. The hair will come back eventually anyway.
Get your slick back, dude. I like that.
Yeah,
That
it'll be back. It'll be back soon.
It doesn't look bad though. Don't let them troll you, bro.
No, it's. I figured it fit the vibe of the week too. It's very Aryan.
Oh man, and I even mentioned the protocols of the learned elders of Zion.
Oh, is that they shave their heads?
No, I just that's the number one anti-Semitic.
I don't endorse that, but I also
right.
All right. Tim Tuttle also brought up the Forbidden shooting, which I've actually had Tim on my show to do a series on that, but it's only on Rumble. That's how forbidden the shooting is. That was the one old AJ got his pee smacked for. That shooting was 3 miles away from Fairfield Asylum that had tunnels. We talked about that in our series. Yeah, there were tunnels there too, because that's one theory that's kicked around, that maybe there's some sort of link between that. Clearly, there's some things that make it look like Lanza may have. What was this? Lanza?
Actually, yeah, I wasn't.
Yeah,
well,
there was an asylum that had tunnels. I forget all the details. You'd have to talk to him about it, or I guess maybe someone could go. I don't recall everything that was talked about on my show, but but yeah, no. Basically, they had the tunnels, and then so some people make some connections because there are some heavy implications from Lanza himself that he may have experienced some sort of sexual trauma at an earlier point in his life, and so then people kind of make conjecture on where and how. And there was some stuff going on, I think, with the local church or something like that he was associated with that had some sort of scandal. Okay. And I think there might be some sort of association. Okay. I'm forgetting. You'd have to definitely go check it out. Someone asked, someone did ask some theory question. I appreciate it, but it's kind of very off topic for what we're talking about, libertarian theory stuff. But if you really want to do that in the future, ask a question that really has nothing to do with what we're talking about, you're going to have to become a patron. And at that point, I will prioritize your money. And that's the $5 level. Someone asked, is there, and no slide at all. I get it. But we're not, it's not that much of a Q&A. Someone asked, is there a connection to the Presidio Child Development Center in the McMartin preschool case? I'm not familiar with the Presidio. It sounds familiar. Maybe that rings a bell to you.
Man, like I said, a lot of the knowledge that I have on McMartin is either, it's pretty tenuous at this point, because it's either how it's overlapped into finders or my research into the Franklin cover-up. And so I will be doing, like I mentioned, a deep dive in the very near future about McMartin. And so I'm sure I'll get into that. But as of now, yeah, I can't even think. I've heard of it. No doubt I've heard of it, but I can't think of any details.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. All right. Let's get right into it. I think maybe we can jump from the Epstein connection to Marion and then just go right to who the hell Marion is and his connections. Because this is kind of the last episode we wrap it up into how the hell this connects into the Fed boys. So let's get into it. Let's talk the Epstein connection.
Okay. So the way that I've basically organized my notes, I kind of make this the case for the CIA connection, the intelligence connections, by implicating this. Basically, the finders were. It came out in documents that the finders and the CIA was running a front operation called Future Enterprises, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's very important because what it seems like, and like I mentioned, the warehouses of the finders and also the W Street apartments, they had all these different computer systems set up at the time. And apparently, whenever they found Stuart Silverstone there that night, the next night when they went to raid the apartments and in pursuit of the warrants, basically, they had found all these empty desks they hadn't been dusted yet. And so there was a very clear outline that computers, all these desks had different computer systems set up, on, and apparently a cop had pulled someone over. And if I remember correctly, it was literally the night before the warrants were actually served to those addresses. And I'm pretty sure that this police officer pulled this. First, he said he saw these well-dressed individuals there. It looked like they were piling documents out into vans as well as computers, right? And so then he said he pulled over one of these individuals, and it was such a crazy, because it was very redacted. It was a part of the document dumps, right? And from what I remember, basically, it was very strange and unusual. And the officer who pulled this man over was like in no way comfortable with what it seemed could potentially be going on at this time. And that apparently that place had already been noted as a potential child pornography operation being conducted out of this address. And so, yeah, it was definitely very unusual, but I wanted to mention this because where we did leave off was basically we had found that Ramon J. Martinez, while he was serving these warrants, had found all these different files that were related to activities of the organization in different parts of the world. And I mentioned like the locations listed, like all these, I mean, international. Yeah. And I mean, London, Germany, the Bahamas, Japan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Africa, Costa Rica, Europe, and we even, there was a file, remember, that was labeled and identified as Palestinian, right? Mm-hmm. And there were, I believe we stopped like right at that point, I think. But there were other files as well that were identified by member name or project name, right? And the projects appearing to be operated for commercial purposes under front names for the finders. But there was one file that was even entitled Pentagon Break-In, and others which referred to members operating in foreign countries. And they said that Marion Petty would just like take them into the height, into the USSR in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And with orders to just drop them into these random locations to behave Cold like War. A child. Yeah. With a game that he gave them to behave like a child. That was literally like a part of something they explained to be one of the games that Marion Petty would assign to the members of the Finders organization. It sounded so much like Charles Manson, who would just wake up one of the girls and be like, find me some jungle fruit in the fucking Congo. And it was basically, I own you. It was that type of situation. This seems
constant mind fuck power games is what it was.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
exactly. But
and we've talked about this extensively. Why this kind of ties into like MK Ultra stuff. You can make the like, if you understand what was attempted to be done in MK Ultra, was one of the big things was the dissociative disorder, trying to create essentially the Manchurian Candidate or some sort of semblance of mind control or influence of some sort. And one of the things frequently theorized is that if you apply enough trauma, you can essentially strengthen dissociative states, because we all have dissociative states to some level. And, apparently children are the most subjective to it, because it's kind of almost this level of, it's what's called, I think some people will call almost autonomic thinking. It's the idea of like, people frequently use the example of like when you're just kind of zoned out and driving. So kids are they have this like, it's almost like they're more, I mean, I'm not a fucking psychologist, but they probably, because they have a more active imagination, they're probably zoned out far more often. They're in a more formative time. They haven't really made their thinking rigid. I mean, this is actually what I think there's a good argument for why adults shouldn't use physical violence to like discipline their children, because I think to some extent you're creating a more controllable individual, because you are essentially strengthening that underlying identity, because they're a child and they can't fight or flight. So essentially what happens is their mind plays this game where it kind of zones out, and so you're strengthening that identity and kind of tainting it as well. Because I'm not saying that whatever that thing is that our brain does is necessarily bad, but but it's a place where our mind wanders to when things are bad, or if we're bored or whatever, and you're making that a dark place and you're making it more in control. So I mean, that's kind of a dumb way to explain it, but if you tie that into literal child abuse in physical and other more depraved ways, what does that create, and what can you do with that? And then also, I mean, there's something to the fact that a lot of these crazed killers we've had in our past, some of the serial killers, is pretty frequent. There's something like that going on. I'm not saying every serial killer was an MK Ultra subject, but we have seen there's been some patterns. So, like for example, most notably, Manson with the MK Ultra stuff, or not obviously MK Ultra, but with connections to what the Jolly on West like center that he was running or whatever, and then
Haight-Ashbury, and then
did
you hear
Ted Kaczynski with his MK Ultra trials in college or whatever the hell.
Definitely. Did you ever hear? And I don't have it anywhere that I could pull up quickly, but have you ever heard the story of Danny Trejo tell about Charles Manson when he was locked up with him in county jail while he was awaiting his sentencing hearing? And
I vaguely have heard this before, but I couldn't tell you.
Dude, it was so crazy. Apparently, Charles Manson took Danny Trejo and a few buddies through that he hypnotized them, right? And he legitimately, Danny Trejo said that first of all, he said that he should be a professional hypnotist with the skills that he had and the ability he had to, first of all, Danny apparently was like a heroin addict and, had all these issues. But I'm not sure if he had been getting high for quite some time at this point. And so he hadn't like experienced, that high specifically for quite some time. And I guess Charles Manson took him and his buddies through this hypnotic state where he successfully made them feel legitimately like they were high, right? Like they had just gotten high.
Oh yeah, I recall.
I just thought I thought what an insane, because the way he said it was like Charles Manson, I forget, he had a quote that was so perfect, because it's like, if he wasn't such a something, then he should be a professional hypnotist or something like that. And anyway, it just fit really well with what ended up happening, and how basically the CIA did end up supplying the Manson family with acid, during that time.
I did want to make the point too. Another thing with this whole dissociative state thing with drugs, that's a common method used to kind of, you know, aggravate these states or whatever, or control these states or influence or whatever word you want
Right.
to use that you find to be the most accurate.
And they-
And so, you know, and that could be in combination with trauma of all sorts, and that, because you are just like, that is, I mean, you are kind of escaping to that other part of your brain or whatever when
said
you are doing
that the
this,
orange-
like hallucinogens.
Right. And they said that the orange sunshine acid that was specific to that moment, basically in time, had been that was replacing you know, it was it was replacing the already I forget what the LSD was, what style of LSD was actually on the street at that time, but it wasn't orange sunshine.
Were you getting at the one that they were using was methamphetamine based? Because I believe,
Yeah, it was
vaguely recall that.
methamphetamine game. Yep, it
Because I know
was.
there's
And
different, when it comes to acid, there's different types of bases that you can use.
Mhm.
And that's another thing. Methamphetamine is already another one that seems to be a common thing that when you, with MK Ultra stuff, that comes up a lot. Methamphetamine.
Exactly.
So something about methamphetamine seems to induce psychosis, and, you know, which I've heard this from people who were prior meth users.
Oh yeah.
You know, you got that developed problems. I guess I can kind of understand. You know, you mix that with hallucinogen, and now you just created a good little
Oh
cocktail
man.
to if you have your own little kind of, you know, sort of somewhat captive by your influence audience, you can
Yep.
you can do some stuff. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
But a part of what I wanted to for sure touch on the idea that um Martinez had also witnessed the fact that there were and so this wasn't observed by Martinez, but was related by an MPD officer, Metropolitan Police Department officer. Uh, they were intelligence files on private families not related to the finders. And the process undertaken appears to have been a systematic response to local newspaper advertisements for babysitters, tutors, etc. A member of the finders would respond and gather as much information as possible about the habits, identity, occupation, etc. of the family. And then the use to which this information, of course, is still unknown. But there was a large amount of data collected on various child care organizations as well, in which, why wouldn't there be, right?
Yeah.
If this group is what I believe they are, you know?
Mhm.
But and then based on files found within the finder's documents during the execution of the search warrants, the MPD even had to contact and alert a woman whose information had been discovered, appearing to show that members of the finders had reached out to her in an attempt to find employment as a babysitter. It was later revealed that she had apparently been referred to finders members as babysitters by employees at Georgetown University. And as we mentioned in part 2, not only does Georgetown University have longstanding ties to the CIA in general, but it also happens to be on record as a primary facility utilized in the infamous Project MKUltra, you know? But the warehouse, this is where the piss and shit in the jars, located with what appeared to be an altar. So the warehouse contains a large library, 2 kitchens, a sauna, hot tub, and a video room. The video room seemed to be set up as an indoctrination center. It also appeared that the organization had the capability to produce its own videos. There were what appeared to be training areas for children and what appeared to be an altar set up in a residential area of the warehouse. Many jars of urine and feces were located in that area. And Agent Martinez also mentioned that both premises were equipped with satellite dish antennas. He discussed the course of action to be taken by MPD with the detective Bradley and he was assured that all of the evidence would be available to U.S. Customs in furtherance of any investigational criminal action pursued. But that wasn't the case. And I guess MPD personnel they were supposed to begin around-the-clock review and sorting of the evidence until completed, and Customs would have access after that was accomplished. It was and that included like going through all the U.S. passports that were discovered, um, and I guess after Agent Martinez left the fourth after he left the Fourth Street premises, he encountered a news media representative and was asked the reason behind U.S. Customs involvement in the investigation. And he advised the reporter that he could not discuss anything clearly and referred to the resident agent in charge in DC. But that's when he basically left immediately after that, understanding it should only take 3 to 5 days for all the information to be sorted, reviewed, and logged by the MPD. And he planned to maintain contact with Detective Bradley specifically until the evidence was accessible again. And by April 13th, 1987, Special Agent Martinez filed a continuation to the report, including details of the investigation, where he claimed that on March 31st, 1987, he contacted Detective James Bradley. He was to meet with him to review the documents seized pursuant to 2 search warrants executed in February. And the meeting was supposed to take place on either April 2nd or 3rd. And as the story goes, on April 2nd, 1987, Agent Martinez arrived at MPD at approximately 9 a.m. Detective Bradley was not available. He instead spoke to a third party who remained anonymous at first. He was willing to discuss. He was only willing to discuss this with Agent Martinez strictly off the record, and he was advised that all the passport data. This is what this anonymous official, who we find out was Sergeant Stitcher later, he advised Martinez that all the passport data had been turned over to the State Department for their investigation. The State Department, in turn, advised MPD that all travel and use of the passports by holders of the passports was within the law and no action would be taken. And that's like traveling to the USSR, Vietnam, right? And this like, the height of the Cold War, right? Like that is ridiculous. It sounds so much like Oswald, just traveling on a military
defect to Russia. No big
right,
whoop.
right. Exactly. Or like Jim
Just
Jones.
kidding, guys. I'm back.
You're right. Or Jim Jones, who's going to Belo Horizonte, Brazil. At the very same time, he's getting a second passport in his home state of Indianapolis. And meanwhile, he's traveling on a second passport to Hawaii, to Russia, dude, what are you? And you find out Dan Mitrione, his, longtime friend, was basically a CIA operator who, basically brought him into the fold, and he was teaching I forget, but he ended up getting murdered in some crazy by some I can't remember exactly how the end of that story. Anyway, Jim Jones, one of the craziest stories of all time. But it's so similar to all of that because, like I said, pattern recognition. How many times can we see such a similar, ridiculous narrative, and then it's poo-pooed? It's immediately just dismissed by, the mainstream narrative and any official, right? Any authoritative figure.
It's like a third rail, or at least it
really
used to be. That's actually what I find the most. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's obviously it's funny, but the Jew tunnel thing, like it is. I just feel like this. We almost like, especially if this ends up being like, holy shit, like we were right type thing. This is like, stop being so fucking worried about touching third rails. Like, why is it that we can't question these things? Like, you can also have the intelligence to not, not be like, 100% they did it, but we can at least be like, we're not retarded, and we can notice that, like, this seems weird. Like, did you guys have anything to do with this? Because it kind of looks like maybe you did. Like, why is that so bad to say? Especially when you start building up receipts, then it becomes, it's kind of like the thing where somebody, like, you say something and they're like, you're a racist or you're a this-ist, and it's like, Okay, but you didn't actually grasp my argument. Like
Exactly.
you didn't use at all attack the argument. You just attacked some other external thing. Like, I don't sure, whatever. Maybe I am a racist, but like, how about you address the argument I just made here? Like that
Exactly.
the whether or not I'm a racist is an irrelevant point to the
Right.
specific argument I just gave.
Right.
So,
But
and it's the
it's
same thing. It's actually both here because it's like everyone's like, oh
yeah.
my god, I can't question Jews. You're like, well, this is one specific sect. Like, why would that be that big of a
Right.
deal? It's also like, and then on the other side, it's like if there, it ends up being some other connections. It's like, why can't we question that? Like, same
Exactly.
deal. So sorry, I didn't mean to
It's
cut you
just
off there.
another way to dismiss anything that you're saying. Is most of the time, I mean, that it would force them to completely redefine the paradigm of, the just of the reality that they embrace. And, I mean, it would take so much. It would take a top-down reflectionary approach on what I believed in to begin with. And I think that's the hardest part for so many people is that they're not dealing in nuance. It's a lot easier if you
Mm,
can just black and white this thing all the way through because,
yeah.
therefore it's good versus bad and it's easy to be right,
Hmm.
and that's never the case. When has that ever been the case?
Yeah.
I mean, so
And it's
that's
hard when you've built up enough precedent for similar such cases that have been shown to be incredibly credible, to where you go, well, you can't just, go, oh my God, how dare you,
right.
even suggest this. You're like, well, I mean, let me point to you X, Y, and Z that are very similar, that we have paperwork of this, that, and this. And it's like, and it's kind of, I feel like what we've done a lot throughout here. I know it may sound like conspiratorial ramblings, but I feel a lot of the stuff we've covered, like, yeah, you may not buy maybe the sources that it originally came from or whatever, but
Right.
we've generally tried to stick with things that have some sort of reporting to some degree. I mean,
Right.
I'm not claiming any sort of, like, for a lot of this stuff. I mean, I haven't dug in deeply, so I'm not giving like a huge stamp of approval of everything said here. But like, this wasn't really a ton of conjecture. I mean, I guess to some extent it was, but this is stuff we're bringing up examples of, like, here's where this has happened, and
Right.
like, whatever. If you don't want to believe that's happened, okay, sorry.
Right. That's
But,
why I try to utilize reinforcing examples as often as
mm,
possible because I always want to be honest when I'm purely speculating, and I've said this many times, but like I my I will for sure disclose my own opinion,
yeah.
but I'm not expecting anybody to take that as, as confirmed fact of any kind, unless unless you trust the research that and the sources that I'm attempting to
Yeah, and
disclose
you
to
can
begin
also
with.
usually gauge the certitude with which someone says something,
Right.
Yeah, so, like, I
But
mean, there are some things that I'll be like, "Yeah, I'll stake my name on it," and
oh, for
whatever,
sure. Yeah,
but, there's also a lot of stuff they're like, "This is pattern recognition, recognize that."
definitely. Yeah, no doubt.
But
And beyond that, it's like I've noticed that we all think a little differently, but
mhm,
it does seem like there are categories of the way our brains operate after you've been exposed to certain levels of information over time. And
mhm,
typically, my inherent position is never to defend the state ever,
yeah,
and so I'll be honest about that till the day I die. And so typically I don't tend to search for angles, that will make like basically defend the state and
yeah, I'm
and
I'm not bending over backwards to exonerate the state. Like,
right,
there is inherent bias there, but the
no
thing is,
doubt.
everyone's biased, and I would argue
Exactly.
that I have that same bias, and I would argue that's a justified bias because this is
Yes.
an entity that I've seen, seen the way they've interacted in countless other examples, and I use that to
Right.
gauge my understanding of their future actions. And
Exactly. And the
so,
last thing I
yeah,
want to believe is that government the highest levels of government are perpetrating and facilitating especially child sex trafficking, but just any human trafficking at all in general. I mean, that's the last thing I want to believe, man. You know, but
at this point, how do you not like? How many
how do
examples
you
do you need to see? How many
exactly?
I mean,
And so I came into this, man. I came into this, and I was drug kicking and screaming down the rabbit holes, right? Like,
mhm.
never did I want to accept that this could happen at such an organized level, you know, and in so many different examples and instances where virtually no accountability at all, and people who were involved. And I mentioned the Inslaw case earlier only because it's so fresh in my mind, but I mean, you see the judge that ruled on the Inslaw case. He says his reappointment was 100% affected by the Justice Department intervening in his reappointment process based on his ruling on behalf of Inslaw against the Justice Department, right? And for stealing the alleged promise software. So it's just like, how many cases can we see this where individuals at the highest level of government who have these personal relationships with a they just so happen to, you know, work with under Ronald Reagan while he's governor of California, and then just so happen, right, to become members in his administration in the White House, or, you know, provide like Edwin Meese, right? Who's a lead example of that in that case, which is just, again, extraordinary. But another example of exactly what we're talking about here, where how many times can we see the DOJ or the highest levels of our federal government intervene to shut down the honest investigation of a case into criminal conspiracy, that the implications are extraordinary, you know? And so I'm almost to the CIA part, I swear. And
I do want to let people know that you did just do the Inslaw case on your show, and I never heard of it. That was I enjoyed that episode, so definitely go check that out.
Man.
But yeah, let's get back to the CIA.
For sure. I'm sorry, dude.
And by the way, feel free to jump in with questions, guys, that are in the live chat. I'll try to bring them up again. Let me know if you guys like this, especially if you're a Patreon. I'll weigh your word a little bit more. I think I like the idea of, you know, especially when I do series, especially if it's more than like 2 episodes, finishing off with some sort of like live stream. That way, if people have questions or want to get in on it, that would be the time for them. But yeah, let's get into the spooky character that is Marion. Marion, whatever the hell his last name is.
Right. So
I just know Marion. That's the only name I can
Marion
remember.
David Petty, apparently.
Yeah, Petty. There we
go. So, but that third party individual, though, that ended up being Sergeant Stitcher, he advised Martinez of circumstances which indicated that the investigation into the activity of the finders had become a CIA internal matter. So this is when Ramon J. Martinez, U.S. Customs officer, who, you know, a member of the Child Pornography Protection Unit. I mean, he had gone to at least he had initially planned on reviewing all of this evidence that they had, you know, acquired through serving the warrants at these finders' properties. And that's when he's told by like I said, the meeting's not going as planned, right? He's being told that, look, the CIA has intervened, and it looks like we're not going any further than this, right? And so the MPD report, it's been classified, secret, and was not available for review. And he was then advised that the FBI had withdrawn from the investigation several weeks prior. And remember, this is in April. The arrests happened in February, as did the warrants. And so it's just the fact that all the evidence would basically be either destroyed or returned to the finders within 3 months. I mean, I don't know. And you wouldn't even keep detailed descriptions of that evidence, which seems to also be the case. It's all extremely vague as to, like, and you heard what Ramon J. Martinez claims he saw in these bags, you know, and the fact that none of that was detailed in the evidentiary reports, and it seemed that all of it was missing, then so that's when he was advised that the FBI had withdrawn from the case several weeks prior, and that the FBI Foreign Counterintelligence Division had directed MPD not to advise the FBI Washington field office of anything that had transpired. No further information will be available. No further action will be taken. All of the evidence collected during the execution of the search warrants had either been destroyed or returned to the finders within days. Even the Washington field office was forced to admit that one of the search warrants lacked the proper witness signature, while the records of the collected evidence did not appear to have any detailed description. And before we address that anonymous individual, who I already said was Sergeant Stitcher, who told Martinez off the record that the CIA had stepped in and basically shut down the case, we should finally introduce the cult of personality himself, Marion Petty, who, by the way, like I've said before, he's known to the members of the Finders as the game caller. And Petty was a former Air Force Master Sergeant who admitted that his son worked for CIA front Air America, which was later renamed as Southern Air Transport.
Yup. Yep, here we are.
By 1995, this front company was essentially overtaken by Jeffrey Epstein and Leslie Wexner, relocating its main base from Miami, Florida to Ohio with the express purpose of running cargo for Wexner-owned companies. But we're encouraged to reduce that down to mere coincidence.
Yup.
That's so nuts, dude.
That is probably like, I get it. It's just a connection, but it's like, it almost makes me think of the concept of like a trust, and that it was always the same group. It just exchanged, primary ownership.
That's exactly how I feel. And by the way, Nebraska State Senator John DeCamp, he wrote the Franklin cover-up, and he I put something he said at the very bottom of my notes, because he says that the Finders is directly connected to the Franklin scandal, right? And man, to me, I wish he would have, I wish he would have stayed alive long enough to really like detail that for us, but I would not be surprised at all, is the point, But so beyond that ridiculous connection between Epstein, Southern Air Transport, which all of that is so much like Barry Seal's story as well, which, the whole thing's just, how many times, buddy?
How many connections?
Exactly. But according to FBI vault documents, Petty's wife, Isabel, admittedly worked for the CIA from 1951 to 1971. And she had been given passports, like I said,
but
to
not
Petty.
Not Petty.
Oh, it wasn't Marion. I'm sorry. Clearly, it doesn't. It means
just
it's all
everyone
fake.
in it, close and within a circle.
Right.
Yeah.
But to all those restricted countries, such as North Korea, North Vietnam, the Soviet Union, it's just, man, that doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you're affiliated with intelligence, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, to be fair, wasn't his cover something along the which I don't know. Like, I don't know the circumstances of how. Like, I have a hard time believing that, like, right off the bat, like, he gave up all this information. Maybe people came out with, this here, this there, that like you can't deny it.
Right.
But like, I'm pretty sure his cover was something along the lines of, oh yeah, well, my wife was like, I was very much against the feds, and she was like my in the group kind of person, she was behind enemy lines.
Yeah,
like,
I have it
that's the
right
way he put
here.
it.
Yeah,
that's it's like that. Oh, that's how we got all these places. I had a man on the inside.
So ridiculous. That's so ridiculous. Yeah, he during an impromptu interview called "The Finder's Keeper," and apparently this reporter Ken Thomas, I think he's an author as well. I think he might have written a couple books, but he apparently at the time he goes to the Virginia properties of the Finders in the Free State area, and he basically finds the group themselves and asks for an interview with Marion Petty, and the guy's willing to talk to him. And I just can't believe that he did say these things straightforward,
Right.
right? Like,
Well,
so
that's why I was like, I didn't know the circumstance if he was confronted with some sort of proof that, like,
right.
hey, here's this
It's
document that
almost
shows
like he was
your
bragging.
brother or something, or not your
Yeah,
brother, but your son and your wife, like, because that's the
right.
only way that I could like imagine that he'd be like. He even admitted that they were scouting him for the feds, and
Yeah.
he was like,
Oh, yeah.
nope, don't want to do that.
Yep.
Like, what a weird story to tell if they have nothing on you, and you're just like, yeah, I'm totally not a fed, but let me tell you about all of this stuff.
Right. And
So.
I feel like some of these people, I think some of these operators, they they start to get very overconfident, and I almost feel like they brag sometimes, and they want to say the silent part out loud, you know? But I could be wrong, but they seem to implicate themselves a little too often,
Yeah,
right?
I do gotta say though, like, I mean, maybe a little bit overly conspiratorial, but while I did just make fun of his story, to some extent,
Mhm.
there might be a grain of truth in that, because if we to our accept there is some sort of other shadowy group,
Right.
it's hard to believe it would be so baked into the infrastructure of our intelligence agencies to where it's essentially synonymous. You would think it would almost be some sort of almost external group that has basically just thoroughly infiltrated that group, or to a
Right.
degree to where they control enough of the influence within that group to bend it to its will. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't be that crazy if he was from some other group that's heavily associated with that, and in some extent he was kind of, playing the man on the inside card. But at the
Right.
same time, that's like a difference, without a distinction. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's still the same thing in the end. Like, at
Right.
the end of the day, whether he's pulling the levers of power to get it to do what he wants, like whether he's an
Mhm.
actual Fed or he's using the Feds, like what
Yeah.
difference does it really fucking make?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
For sure. And it's not, and it's not clear. Like, I mean, well, it's at the very least, it's pretty. I don't know. It seems like Toby Terrell also has a lot of his statements are tongue in cheek. It's just, that could be the case, but too much does it seem like members of his inner circle that were at the highest levels of the Finders organization, they seem very confident that this will never surface. And
Mhm.
once you hear what Toby Terrell says about Athena Veronis as potentially being the FBI minder in the room, the fixer who comes to, apparently the location of their front operation called um, Future Enterprises. It's like it gets a little bit more intense as far as the cover up. As far as I'm concerned, it lends credibility to that. But so,
Wasn't there, real quick, wasn't there also maybe you're about to get into it, so you can let me know if you are, but I
mhm,
believe there was some sort of other document, I don't remember specifically who it came from, where we get the heavily implicated, to basically straight up saying it, that
mhm,
the CIA had a interest in the group.
yep,
Essentially, the most vague way you can possibly put it.
and it's
Essentially, and you
redacted
can,
pretty
yeah,
heavily.
you can take
Yeah,
that to whatever degree. That could just mean that they fucked up something, and if the truth came to light, this would look bad on them. Something. It
right.
doesn't necessarily mean they're completely controlling this operation. So
Yeah,
take that with a grain of salt. I think when you look at all this stuff, it paints a pretty crazy picture. But either way, there is a document that heavily implies, and you're about to tell me about it, that they
definitely,
had some sort of interest in, at the very least, maintaining or in controlling the way the information came out.
definitely. And the person who's responsible for that document died a little bit suspiciously very shortly after and before the 93 inquiry, oh my God, could take place. And so, um, but that interview with Ken Thomas and Marion Petty, he asked Marion Petty some critical questions that produced kind of a unique perspective into the mind of the game caller. And Marion Petty told Ken Thomas, I had 2 apartments back in the 30s and 40s in Washington and just kept an open house. So anyway, it goes back that far. 4 people here with me now have been with me for over 25 years. In fact, I kept another thing called the Free State back in the hippie period, back in the mountains here. It was called the Free State, and it was known all over the world. So I kept an open house to beatniks. We're talking about the 50s now, going back to World War II. I kept an open house mainly to intelligence and counterintelligence people in Washington, OSS people passing through, things like that. So the open house at that time was more or less at that level. Petty was asked, what do you make then of these stories that connect the finders up to a pedophilia ring in the CIA? Petty responded by saying, I just kept an open house to a lot of the counterintelligence and intelligence people over the years. Imagine that being your response. You don't even address it.
What do you think about that? Well, I have an open house to counterintelligence and intelligence figures.
Exactly, man.
What about the child rape? I kept an open.
Seriously, man. I've tried all my life. This is how he responds to that question. This is so crazy. I've tried all of my life to get behind the scenes in the CIA. I sent my wife in as a spy to spy on the CIA for me. Imagine having the balls to think that you could do that. You know, like,
I mean, but on the flip side, like I did proffer the possibility that maybe there is something to it. I don't think so, but it's possible. But that also just implicates, that doesn't make it any better. That just makes it like, whoa, what?
Exactly. And the way he describes it is so hilarious. He's like, "Oh, I didn't force her." Like, he doesn't say that, but the way he says it is like, he says, she was very happy about it. Happy to tell me everything she found out. She was in a key place, you know, with the records, and she could find out things for me. And my son worked for Air America, which was a proprietary of the CIA. Right? So that was what he told Ken Thomas in that interview.
Insane.
But that third party individual that went on the record with, or went off the record with Martinez, and whose name was redacted in the original reports, he was later confirmed as Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department Sergeant John Stitcher. And by May of 92, not long before the 93 inquiry into the allegations of CIA involvement, Sergeant Stitcher would die from a reported cause of death listed in his obituary as septic shock. However, during the initial investigation in February of 87, Stitcher wrote an investigative report. And this is, I believe this is at the same time that he has to tell Martinez, because there's like, I've heard that he was so pissed, Sergeant Stitcher, that this was being shut down by the feds. And as a CIA internal matter, as he told Martinez, that he was like allegedly screaming in the halls at MPD at Toby Terrell, the elite member of the Finders group, who was the one verbally defending them all right after the original arrest. And that he's yelling at him in MPD saying, I know you're conducting child pornography in this warehouse. And he's like screaming at him. And so I think that's why he was off the record at this time with Martinez, because he wasn't willing yet, you know, and it's just, man, and it was classified as secret, you know, right after this happened. And so this is when Sergeant Stitcher wrote an investigative report labeled confidential and do not disseminate, given the title Finder's Involvement with the Central Intelligence Agency, right? And like I said, this is redacted, you know, but
this is a small act of rebellion.
Yeah.
And it may have got him killed.
I think it's possible. We can't say for sure, but it's definitely possible. Weird timing, to say the least.
Yes, at the very least.
Right. So the largely redacted report reads that approximately 15:30 hours, February 18th, 1987, Detective Redacted spoke with Special Agent Redacted in reference to any contact the members of the Finders may have had with the agency. Special Agent Redacted was guarded but frank in his response. He confirmed that Redacted Isabel, now deceased, was an employee of the agency from 1950 until 1971. When asked if our investigation was treading on anyone's toes out there, Redacted replied, sort of. Dude, he acknowledged that they have had someone working on the case since it first broke on the news media. He also stated that the agency is aware that during the period 1969 to 1971, Redacted traveled to Moscow, North Korea, and North Vietnam. Almost 3 full lines redacted. Special Agent Redacted stated that he would contact Detective Redacted on February 19th, 1987 to arrange to come to this office for further discussion. As of 14:30 hours, February 19th, he has not contacted this office. As a practical matter, what is not being said is as important as what Special Agent Redacted has said. Redacted acknowledged that we are treading on their toes and that they have had someone working on the case since February 5th when it broke. They apparently have a vested interest in Redacted and or the group. They have not contacted any of the investigating agencies while they have been working on the case. They are also aware that Redacted traveled to prohibited countries during a period of hostilities that could only have been arranged by them. Finally, he stated that 2 lines redaction. This could explain a lot about the group's funding, which we have been unable to document to this point. Entire redacted paragraph labeled confidential. Regardless of what type of operation they may have been engaged in, there will be no justification for the way the children have been treated, and the matter will be addressed in Family Division Superior Court. And that's what Sergeant John Stitcher said about the potential funding being connected to the CIA, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect place to end it, unless you feel like there's other substantive stuff from this, but I feel like that is the headshot.
It's not a bad one.
Yeah.
Let me see. There's one more area. Yeah, let me finish these last couple statements here. So, although the report was heavily redacted under classification confidential, it clearly states that the CIA had a vested interest in the cult, right? Multiple lines of the report seem to even suggest that the CIA was potentially involved in the funding of the group. A memo was produced during the 93 State Department inquiry into CIA involvement in the initial investigation. It stated, the CIA admitted to running an operation that was a front for a domestic computer training operation called Operation Future Enterprises, but that it had gone bad, and that they had accidentally hired a member of the Finders cult, but dismissed him when the connection to the group was exposed in February of 1987. The CIA spokesman at the time, David Christian, called the charges ridiculous, but then proceeded to admit that the CIA sent some employees to a company called Future Enterprises Incorporated for computer training in the 1980s. Vice President of Future Enterprises, Joseph Marinick, said the company has trained CIA employees in computer use and continues to do so. And he also admitted that one prominent Finders member named Robert Gardner Terrell, better known as Toby Terrell, who even owned one of the raided properties, was a former IRS employee and happened to work for the company Future Enterprises before he was let go in February 1987, which happened to coincide to the exact same time the arrest took place in Tallahassee. Now, he would later author the book called The Game Caller, and in the book, he implicates an FBI agent by the name of Athena Veronis. as the fixer, largely responsible for the cover-up. She was also the woman and FBI agent that the character Clarice Starling was allegedly loosely based on in the film Silence of the Lambs. And in his book, Tobe Terrell claims that FBI agent Athena Veronis met with him downstairs at the Future Enterprises office and told him, "We're going to put a lid on this thing." She would later be the very authority who completely denounced Ramon J. Martinez and the U.S. Customs documents, claiming that Agent Martinez had made all of it up, falsifying evidence in a selfish, self-serving effort to achieve a potential promotion. She also conveniently became the first FBI liaison for NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I mean, there's a few other things that I really want to talk about, but we can end it whenever you want, my brother.
I think, I mean, unless you have another bombshell, but that leaves it at like.
Let me say, I'll
hey,
say two things, two more things. All right, I'm sorry.
All right. No, you're good. We got time. I just was like, that's a note
not
to
a
leave it
bad
on. Like,
spot.
What's that mean, guys?
Exactly. Right. So I won't add much more, but I have mentioned John DeCamp multiple times, that former Nebraska state senator, and he was the author of the Franklin cover-up, like I said, and apparently during a Q&A following a pretty explosive article published in an issue of U.S. News and World Report, he claimed in this Q&A that the finders were associated with the CIA and that they were abusing children by means of indoctrination. He reportedly said, "I was getting information anonymously. I found out later that it came from CIA people who were concerned about what had happened. The CIA had denied any involvement in it even today, but there was enough documentation to show that children at a fairly tender age were being used for sexual purposes to compromise people. And for the mind control nonsense, why? I don't know, and I don't claim to know." That's what he said in this Q&A. And before John DeCamp died, he also made the stunning claim that the finders operation was somehow directly connected to the Franklin network that had been exposed and covered up in Nebraska around the exact same time. Now, a more recent connection to the finders that seems to almost confirm our darkest suspicions, it comes in the form of Theodore Gerald Rice, who was a professor at Georgetown University and also happened to be a member of the Finders cult. May 10th, 2017, a U.S. district judge sentenced Theodore Gerald Rice, age 81, to 90 months in prison. May 10th, 2017, followed by a lifetime of supervised release for the distribution of child pornography. According to his plea agreement, on August 17th, 2015, Rice, ex-Finders member, professor at Georgetown University, used a personal computer to distribute in a peer-to-peer network a file containing a video of minors engaged in sexually explicit conduct. Additionally, during a search of Rice's home on September 9th, 2015, investigators found Rice in possession of various electronic devices and CDs that were later found to contain 291 videos and 29 still images of child pornography. And I'll leave you with this. Nick Bryant, I described him in part one as the OG. He's really who pulled me into this world by his research into the Franklin scandal and his book. But I believe that's kind of the preeminent work. You know, the Franklin scandal is called A Story of Power Brokers, Child Abuse and Betrayal. And he wrote in his book, "I wasn't so much anguished by the threats and intimidation I endured delving into the arcane mysteries of this universe, but rather by the realization of its very existence. a universe that encompasses the refined industrial destruction of children and its cover-up by the very state and federal authorities who have pledged to protect children from the depravity of evil men. The children and our society as a whole have been betrayed.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to end it better than that. I mean, it's awful shit, but like, I don't know. When you think it through, you're like, oh, there's something to it, and especially some of the cult stuff. That you're like, what is going on there? Like, obviously, we got the MK Ultra stuff, but it's like also like, is that as deep as that goes? Like, what are the motivations at play here? Like, is this really all about just control? I mean, and does that have multiple meanings? So,
in the Johnny Gosh story, in the Franklin cover-up with Paul Bonacci, I mean, satanic ritual abuse, man. I mean, I think that proved it, even more than this case, which, man, someday we'll have to talk about that one.
Yeah.
But
all right, man, this has been great. I appreciate when you showed up. I mean, it's obviously dark stuff, but I do think this is, once you start like and it seems like it'd be black pilling, and I guess in some sense it is, but I think once you see through the veil and you see these people and what they do and see them for what they are, it allows you to have that much more contempt. And also, honestly, in a lot of ways, the energy we give them is kind of like, so you can just see them as, once you just see them as just these evil fucks over here, I think it gets you to a better place. So, but I appreciate it, man. You want to tell people where they can find you at?
So
I'll definitely have you on again for something else.
Thanks, brother. But first, I just want to say thank you, man. Like, honestly, just the exposure you've given me on your platform and everything, but more than that, just the conversation, man. I feel like at this point, I can call you my friend, but I really do appreciate all of this, and thank you, brother. Like, sincerely. Yeah. But other than that,
it was surreal finding your content when I came upon you. I was like, Jesus. But yeah, and then the kind of the story we had before, which I think we talked about in the beginning. But so it's cool to see you killing it and creating great content, and I hope you keep blowing up more and more. So
Thanks,
I think everyone who's checking this out should definitely go check out your stuff. I've probably, gone through, at least 30% to somewhere in the range of 50% of your content already. So, and
Thanks,
a lot of
man.
good stuff. But I zoned out. Do you already say where people can find you at?
No, I didn't plug it all. But so on Twitter, I'm at underclasspod. On Instagram at the Underclass Podcast. And I haven't said this on any interview at all yet, but I do have a Patreon. I'm not really offering anything there yet, but basically a value for value model at this moment. If anything I've ever done, you appreciate, whatever, throw me anything.
And
I'm grateful.
I appreciate his work. So I think if you guys want to support someone, definitely go support him. I wouldn't mind if you support me, but pick one or the other. I mean, you get what you get back. He's definitely creating better content.
Oh, stop it, dude! Stop it! No.
I do like the way you approach your episodes. You do have a good format, so I think that's good stuff. But if you guys want to help out my show, like, that's patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Like I said, you kind of get the value that you put in. If you want to see me doing bigger, better stuff, that's the only way we'll do it. I got to put food on the table for my family at the end of the day. That comes first. But if you can tip the scales from one to the other slowly over time, every little bit counts. Whatever, maybe I'll get to a point where I can make a fucking documentary about Terrence Cheeky or something. But I got big stuff coming in the near future. I should have some announcements. Still waiting on scheduling. But yeah, I do want to remind you guys, tomorrow I have Pete on. So if you do want that you got to be a patron. That'll definitely be a Rumble live stream considering the topic, and that'll probably won't ever come out on YouTube. Because we're kind of hitting a third rail hard as hell with that topic. Definitely check that out. Twitter at @TowerGangJose, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. I mean, if you don't want to support money-wise, at least share my content and his content and Austin's. Like I said, I really do appreciate his stuff. So definitely, at the very least, go check out his stuff. And with that, we are out of here.